if you've not watched part 1 of the series, go back and take a look at that. We're going through the key drivers in the key lines of a generic surfactant company's P&L statement that you see here. And today we're going to get into the raw materials line. So stating the obvious here, the total spend on raw materials is going to be the product of two numbers. That's the quantity of raw materials that you buy and the delivered net price per kilogram or metric ton of those raw materials. So I've jotted down a few things which affect the quantity of the raw material that you're going to buy. And this being chemistry, the first thing is stoichiometry. That's the relative proportion of the reactants needed to get you a given finished product. In the simple case of reacting LAB with sulfur trioxide to give you LAS, you're going to take 1 mole each of LAB and SO3, right? And given their molecular weights, if you react 750 kilograms of LAB with 250 kilograms of SO3, you're going to get 1 metric ton of LAS. That is the stoichiometry. So that's the theoretical yield, but real life has an impact, and depending on the process chemistry you're using, you might expect to get pretty high, but not exactly 100% of the theoretical. It might be 99% and 99.5%, whatever. And so you would adjust your raw material requirements to take account of that. But real life comes in even further, particularly in a plant setting when thinking about startups and shutdowns, when for portions of both of those, your plant's going to be running with raw material, but you're not producing saleable product. In many cases, you'll be producing off-spec or waste product. And so again, you're going to have to make adjustments in terms of the amount of raw material that you purchase to make a given quantity of end product. And even more real life will happen as mistakes are made. Bad batches happen, sometimes even microbial contamination, not in the case of LAS, but certainly in the case of SLES at the lower dilution level. All these things we just talked about factor into the total net yield of your reactions and thus into the amount of raw material that you have to buy for a given product mix. Now look, for many mature processes like sulfonation and ethoxylation, especially when you're making high volume commodities like LAS and detergent range alcohol ethoxylates, you should expect your process yields in real life to approach theoretical. But when you get into lower volume specialties, especially batch products, and things like fermentation with their long cycle times, low titers, difficult separation processes, your yields are going to be somewhat below the theoretical maximum. The flip side of that is it leaves plenty of room for improvement. Now, price. Again with the obvious. You need to get that as low as possible for product of the right quality, on time, every time. And your best strategy for getting the best price is to buy from a competitive market. And if you're not satisfied with the level of competition in that supplier market, you can look at doing some things to improve that situation. For example, and I'm reading here, you could try to develop overseas sources or encourage other suppliers into the game. You could take a look at a make versus buy strategy, especially if you're a high volume user. Look at making some of your own raw materials for your own use. You could look at picking your spot on the value chain, right? And so if you think that the market for example, lauryl alcohol is more competitive than that for lauryl alcohol ethoxylate, you could buy the lauryl alcohol and have that totally ethoxylated, thereby taking advantage of the more competitive nature of that spot, that alcohol spot on the value chain. Secondly, you also need to be a student of the market you buy from. You need to know more about the market that you buy from than your suppliers, and so you can correctly anticipate the timing and the magnitude of some of those key inputs that go into the raw materials that you buy: crude oil, natural gas, palm kernel oil, etc., and do that on an educated basis. Seek indexation if you can, if it works to your advantage, so you can be assured that you're not being overcharged as a result of movements in some of those key feedstocks. And finally, not many people think of this, but be a good customer. Pay your bills on time, make accurate forecasts, keep your commitments, and expect in turn your suppliers to do exactly the same. And that should pay off in the long run. If it doesn't, maybe you have the wrong suppliers. And so finally, if you address all of these factors, you should be able to minimize the cost of raw materials that you need for a given product mix. If there are any I've missed, or you have any of your favorites, please do let me know. I'd be happy to talk about those on future videos. And in the meantime, thank you again very much for your attention. Thanks for listening.